Trump's new press secretary just took apart Ilhan Omar and the entire Democratic establishment, exposing their blatant hypocrisy. Live on air. You won't believe how she flipped the media's own words right back at them. Now, picture this, the press room, packed. Cameras clicking, hushed murmurs rippling through the crowd like an electric current. The air? Thick with anticipation and quiet hostility. Karoline Leavitt stepped onto the podium, her movements steady, deliberate. Reporters braced themselves, laptops open, cameras rolling. She adjusted the microphone, her sharp gaze sweeping the room. She already knew how this was going to go. This wasn't just a briefing, it was a setup. A political chess match where the media held their pre-scripted narratives like loaded weapons, ready to fire. She gave them a polite smile, but there was steel behind it. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, voice clear, unwavering. "I know you've all been looking forward to this briefing, so let's get right to it." A pause. A calculated silence. Then, "Before we begin, let's establish something," she continued, tone sharp but controlled. "If the media is going to set the rules for outrage, then at the very least, they should be consistent about it." A few reporters shifted in their seats, already sensing where this was going. Karoline placed both hands on the podium, locking eyes with the front row. If a Republican stood here today and said, "We need to fight in the streets," you'd all be losing your minds. Demanding resignations, congressional investigations, maybe even arrests. She let the words sink in. But when Ilhan Omar says it, suddenly, it's just a passionate plea for justice. The room tensed. Murmurs spread like a ripple across the press corps. They had come prepared to go after her, but Karoline had just set the terms of engagement. A hand shot up. Predictable. Peter from CNN. He cleared his throat, layering his voice with calculated skepticism. "Karoline, are you suggesting that Ilhan Omar's comments were meant to incite violence?" Karoline tilted her head slightly, as if Peter had just asked whether water was wet. "I'm not suggesting anything, Peter. I'm quoting her. Or, do you deny that she said it?" Peter hesitated. The camera zoomed in, capturing the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Karoline leaned forward slightly, pressing in. "Let's be clear," she continued. "When Democrats call for fighting in the streets, it's brushed off as rhetoric. But when a Republican so much as breathes the wrong way, suddenly, it's a threat to democracy. So tell me, Peter, what's the rule here? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the rules only apply to one side." Peter opened his mouth, then shut it. No response. Another reporter, a woman from NBC, jumped in, scrambling for a different angle. "Surely you're not saying the president is above criticism. Ilhan Omar was simply expressing concerns about this administration's policies." Karoline turned to her unimpressed. So, was every conservative who got labeled a domestic extremist for questioning the Biden administration? Funny how that works. Silence. A few furrowed brows. Some reporters shuffled their notes, searching for an angle to trap her. But she wasn't done yet. She glanced toward the cameras. This moment wasn't just for the journalists in the room. It was for every American watching at home. "Let's play a game," she said, voice calm measured. "Imagine if President Trump stood here today and said, 'We need to take this fight to the streets.' What would happen?" No one answered. The silence stretched just long enough. Then she filled it herself. There'd be front-page hysteria, emergency broadcasts, calls for impeachment. The media would be in full meltdown mode. She let the words settle before delivering the final blow. "But Ilhan Omar says it? Nothing. Just another Tuesday." More silence. The energy in the room shifted. The press had come to corner her. But now, they were the ones on the defensive. Then a voice broke through. "Karoline," it was James from NBC, a veteran journalist. His tone? Measured. Careful. "Are you saying that outrage over political rhetoric is selective?" Karoline turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "I don't need to say it, James." She let the moment breathe. "You all prove it, every single day." Murmurs. A reporter whispered something to a colleague. Another hastily typed, fingers tapping against the keyboard. Peter from CNN tried again, sharper this time. But Karoline, don't you think context matters? Ilhan Omar was referring to. Karoline cut in, smirking. Oh, I love that word. Context. She tilted her head. Because when President Trump said, peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard, you all ignored the context. In fact, you used it to try and throw him in jail. A ripple of unease spread through the room. Someone coughed. Another reporter muttered something under their breath. Peter clenched his jaw, trying to formulate a response. But before he could, Karoline held up a hand. You want to talk about context, Peter? Let's talk about it. Ilhan Omar didn't say peacefully and patriotically. She said, we have to fight in the streets. So I'll ask again, why is it different? Silence. No one wanted to answer that question. Then, right on cue, a phone buzzed from the front row. A reporter glanced down at the screen, eyes widening before looking up. Karoline noticed. What is it? She asked casually. The reporter hesitated. Ilhan Omar just tweeted about you. Karoline let out a quiet chuckle. Of course she did. She turned back to the room, expression completely unbothered. Let me guess, she's calling me dangerous? Maybe even a racist? She reached for the iPad on the podium, pulling up the live tweet. Then, in a deliberate, unwavering voice, she read it aloud. Karoline Leavitt is spreading dangerous rhetoric to distract from Trump's reckless agenda. She looked back at the press corps, scanning the room. That's cute, she said. But here's the thing, her words are on video. Plain as day. And she doesn't get to decide what's dangerous and what's not. The press sat in silence. They knew she had a point. They just didn't know how to admit it. Karoline took a breath, letting the weight of her words settle. This wasn't over. Not even close. She straightened, eyes sharp. Next question. The room stayed still, tension hanging heavy in the air. The press had come in expecting to control the narrative, but instead, they found themselves cornered. Karoline tapped her fingers lightly against the podium. She waited. She knew someone would try again, to shift the conversation, to take back control. James from the Washington Post took the bait. Karoline, he started. You're quoting Ilhan Omar's words, but are you really suggesting she meant it as a call for violence? Karoline tilted her head slightly, as if amused. James, am I supposed to believe she meant it as a poetry reading? A few low chuckles rippled through the room. James cleared his throat. But rhetoric is open to interpretation. Karoline nodded, slow and deliberate. Oh, I see what you're doing. A smirk. Now, suddenly, intent matters? She let the trap close around them.